Now, Marty Brennaman, a Hall of Famer, he's old enough to remember Sandy Koufax. You've had a chance. In fact, if I'm not mistaken, Dad, I think you just saw him recently when you were at Vin Scully's funeral.
Of course, there were so many former Dodgers there and people from the baseball world, not exclusive to the Dodgers, that came to Vin's funeral, and Sandy and his wife were there. And we chatted with him briefly. He has an amazing recall for names. And it goes back, I'll tell you another story. Years and years ago, you mentioned Ed Jucker. UC decided to have a fundraiser for their baseball field. And of course, Jucker, as you mentioned, coached both sports. And they called me and said, "We got Sandy Koufax coming in. Would you MC the brunch that we have on," I think it was a Saturday morning? And I said, yeah. And so a lot of people were there. Donations were made to improve the baseball facility at UC. And Jucker and his wife came in from Hilton Head, South Carolina. And Koufax came, and he's a very reclusive guy. He does not like to be singled out. It's just an uncomfortable thing for him, but he's a very pleasant guy. And he showed up. He came on Friday and spent 3 hours with the UC pitching staff the night before, teaching them how to throw the curveball that he threw. And that was a pitch that brought it all together for him. He had the good fastball, but once he developed a curve and could throw it for strikes, everything changed with him. And he came in, he worked with the UC baseball team. And he was a guy that when he came into a room, and it's still true today, he has a certain aura about him that seemingly everything stops and all the attention is directed at him. He's a very handsome guy, a very soft-spoken guy, but very, very pleasant. And it was one of the thrills of my lifetime to meet him. And then years later, Amanda and I saw him the big mall in Phoenix. We were over there one day during spring training, and he and his wife were in there, and I saw him across in a department store, and I turned to Amanda. I said, "You know who that is?" She said, "Yeah, that's Sandy Koufax." We went over there. He remembered my name, and you know what a thrill that gives anybody when you meet somebody of incredible celebrity and they know who you are. And so I've seen him twice since that breakfast years ago in honor of Ed Jucker, and he's just a first-class individual in every sense of the word.
It's interesting you bring up about the aura he has about him. I'm convinced that so much of that has to do, Dad, with the fact that he basically was a recluse forever. Now, in recent years, a little less so. He's come out to do things like you just made reference to with Ed Jucker, or whether it's things with the Dodgers, which he was not doing for a long, long time. I think that has a lot to do with it, don't you?
Yeah, I do. But I think, if you're not comfortable in the limelight, and that's just the way you are. And unfortunately, I think a lot of people mistake that for being purposely aloof, not liking people. That could be further from the truth. They tell a great story about going to Dodger fantasy camp. In years past, it was held in Vero Beach, where the Dodgers trained until they moved to Arizona. And they brought all the ex-Dodgers in. This is years ago. Duke Snider was still alive, and Sandy and Don Drysdale. The list went on and on and on. And, inevitably, you're going to have a couple of guys that stand in there to hit off the former greats, and they want to impress their colleagues and show what they can do. And this guy stepped into the batter's box to hit off Koufax. And, they're just throwing it over the plate and letting these guys hit. And this guy's going to make a big deal out of it. And he said, "Okay, come on, big boy. Let me see what you got." And Koufax said, "I'll show you what I got." And he buried the first pitch in the guy's ribs and said, "That's what I got. Now, you want to see more of that?" That ended that.
One of the notes we talked about this day in history, Roger Maris passed away That's another guy for so many, many reasons. I just find to be such an interesting historical figure in the sport of baseball because there were so many people that were angry with this guy when he broke Babe Ruth's record because he played in more games in a single season than Babe Ruth. Did you ever have a chance to meet him or spend any time around him? The whole thing about him, and of course his death very early on from cancer, it just seems so sad for a guy who was just going out and by all accounts was a guy that was a grinder and was just going out to try and be the best baseball player he could possibly be.
No, I never had the pleasure of meeting him, but you bring up a good example because he was a guy that abhorred the celebrity and the publicity that went around his chase to eventually breaking Ruth's record. He didn't like it at all. And it was sad because they say he was a very nice guy, but he just was not comfortable. He was in a perfect situation up until the 61 season because he was in the same outfield with Mickey Mantle. And Mantle, garnered, if not most of it, not all of it, most of the publicity on that Yankee team. And Roger Maris was basically there. He was a good player, but he was not the kind of guy that drew the focus of all the media covering baseball. The same thing that happened when he decided unknowingly to make a run at Babe Ruth's record. He was not comfortable with that at all. And it was unfortunate. The guy's doing what he can do. And I can always remember watching the home run that he hit to break Ruth's record. And I was in a fraternity house at Randolph-Macon College before I transferred to Carolina. And we watched the game on TV and watched him hit the home run off Tracy Stallard, number 61. No, his situation was sad because I don't know what people expected him to do. Just stop hitting home runs and preserve the single season record for Ruth. But it was unfortunate that he had to go through what he went through.
Dad, I was starting to ask you about this Carlos Correa thing.
Right.
Correa, Turner, and I'm drawing a blank on the third. At the end of these contracts, each of them is going to be 41 years old. And already
Correct.
Some of the beat writers for the San Francisco Giants are saying, hey, look, there's no way he'll still be here then. The general manager won't be here. The president won't be here. Said, but we're just trying to win, or the Giants are trying to win right now. $27 million a year for Carlos Correa.
Well, I mean, there's some people. Keith Law rated him as the number one free agent of all of them. That's just one so-called baseball expert, although Keith Law has a lot of juice in the world of baseball, professional baseball. I don't care if he's a number one free agent in the history of the world. I just scratch my head in wonderment that teams are willing to go the number of years in which they are so freely giving it out. They had the money because they failed in their bid to get Aaron Judge. So I guess they decided we'll just turn around and see what we can do with it since we have it allocated for a big, big contract. And they went out and signed Correa. What I found interesting is New York Met fans went to bed last night thinking that they had a real solid chance of getting him. All signs pointed late last night to the Mets having the edge. And lo and behold, Steve Cohen and all of his people and all Mets fans in New York woke up to the news that Carlos Correa had signed with the San Francisco Giants. I don't know where this is all going to end. And I agree with the writers that say by the time this contract runs out, that the general manager will be gone. Probably the manager will be gone. Who knows? Maybe it'll be a new owner. You never know about things like that. But I just think it's incredible lunacy, and it's a microcosm, I think, of what the problems are all about relative to the game of baseball. I really do.
Another team that was they thought they were going to be in the mix. They thought they had some things outside of just dollars and cents to try and lure Correa was Minnesota. And, this was a team that felt like, hey, look, this is a great place to live. It's a great place to raise your family. Instead of going to out to San Francisco, which certainly has beautiful areas, but they got a lot of issues out there that Minnesota does not. But, I mean, they weren't even in the same galaxy when all is said and done once the Mets and the Giants. And look, I got people that are sending me notes all the time on Twitter, killing me, killing you, about us saying that, there's no such thing as a small market team or a mid-market team. I don't know how anybody in the world can make that argument.
I don't either. I think people like your friend Scott Boras and people like that are the ones that would poo-poo the concept that there are small market teams because it defeats what he's all about. But I don't think there's any question now, and if anybody need a reason to say, yeah, there's a definite difference between the big market teams and the small market teams, this right here is an indication of that. Steve Cohen buys the New York Mets, and he's worth billions of dollars. I think he's considered to be the wealthiest man among all Major League Baseball owners. And he went into that ownership with the idea that I'm going to do everything in my power to see that this ball club is in a position to go to the postseason and win a world championship for New York Mets fans. I don't think there are a lot of owners that can afford to take that position, although you wonder now, with the Giants stepping up 2 or 3 years ago, I don't think the Giants would have even given this a small thought. But apparently a decision has been made within the ownership that we're going to go all out. We had the money because we didn't get Judge. We signed this guy. We brought in a couple of pitchers. And now the proof of the pudding is going to be played out over the course of the 2023 season. If I were a Dodger fan, given what's gone on between the Padres and the Giants, I would be a little bit concerned because they, as you said, they had not really done anything. And obviously those two clubs have gotten better based on the careers of the players that they've signed these multi-million-dollar contracts to. It's going to be interesting to see what happens now between now and the beginning of the baseball season as far as the Dodgers are concerned.
Gosh, I just drew a total blank on what I was getting. I know. We've talked before about the financial structure of baseball and how it's so vastly different than the other three major sports that have salary caps, et cetera. And we talked about this at length when you were not on the show the other day. And I'm convinced. Tell me if you think I'm on to something here or if I'm wrong. If the owners are going to sit down and one day try and have a serious conversation with the Players Association where you use those two words that generally get them to get up and walk out of the room, salary cap. The one thing that's going to have to happen, the owners are going to have to open up their books. Because, look, at the end of the day, these are privately held companies. These aren't publicly traded companies. These are privately held companies. And if you're in the Players Association, there is no way on God's green earth that you are going to agree to a salary cap without seeing what's really going on inside the books of these Major League Baseball teams. Do you think that's fair to say?
Nor would I. I wouldn't either. I mean, it really. Be honest now. Let's face facts. It makes you wonder, with the owners adamantly opposing any idea that they would open their books. It makes you wonder, and the only way to put that wonder aside is to have them open their books, let the player union see what the owners have been preaching all this time. And then it would certainly, if it turns out that the owners are right in what they've been saying, then it puts the player union in a tough situation because now the owners have proven that everything they've said, albeit not having opened their books up until this particular point, and we're using this as an example, the player union, then the ball would be in their court. And I think the fan support would fall heavily on the side of the owners because they would have proven that everything they've said all along without opening their books turns out to be true. But I don't think, as long as the owners stand by their decision not to open the books, then I don't see where the player union has any position to take but the one they've taken, quite honestly.
Yeah, because their argument always is, and they're 1,000% correct on this, is that, you look at every single owner that's bought a franchise in the last 10, 15, 25 years, including the Castellini Group, the value of the franchises have gone through the roof. I mean, you buy it for $300 million, all of a sudden it's valued at $1 billion, and that's what they're looking at. They're correct in that assumption. It doesn't mean necessarily, and I'm not saying they aren't, because I don't know. It doesn't mean that they're making a lot of money year in and year out, especially when you're drawing, in the Reds' case, 1.3 million fans into the ballpark.
Well, what I thought interesting is people looking at what an owner paid for the team that he owns when he bought it, what he paid for it, and now what the projection is as to what it's worth. And those people will say, well, see, right there is an example of how lucrative and how positive it is to be a Major League Baseball owner, and these guys are screaming poverty. Well, you know what? All that money is on paper. That money doesn't mean a damn thing until they turn around and try to sell the club. Now, if they sell the team, maybe they get the amount of money that the club was said to be worth. But I think that's a poor argument. If you pay $10 for it and it's worth $50, it's worth $50 if you sell it. If you don't sell it, then it ain't worth anything except what it says on paper. I still maintain that, however it can happen, and I don't know that it will ever happen. I don't know where this game goes to walk out of this wilderness of small market versus large market, and teams that can afford to pay the big Correa contracts and the Turner contracts, and teams that can't. I don't know where all this comes to an end. You hear people say there's no middle class. It's all low class and all penthouse class, and maybe it is. I don't know, but I just think, as we talked a couple of weeks ago, I would say without any question, this game has more problems than any of the major sports. And where it will all end up and where it will lead to, I have no idea. I really believe that, I hate to say this, but I think if the one thing that could occur that would open up a lot of people's minds is if you had one or more teams that file for bankruptcy. If that happened, I think all of a sudden the playing field changes a little bit, because you have clubs going under, and I would not be surprised if there were not some teams that were struggling to keep their head above water right now. I really truly believe that.
Well, I can promise you, and we talked about this last week, I can promise you that will happen if this Bally's thing falls apart. And I don't know how accurate that is. About on their conference call, the parent company, Sinclair Broadcasting, a couple of weeks ago, saying that Bally's was okay till the end of 2023, technically Diamond Sports, whatever they call the
right.
LLC there. But if all of a sudden, we talked about it, if all of a sudden this guaranteed money for these teams is all of a sudden gone overnight, 20, 30, 40, $50 million a year banking on, that's going to happen. All right, look, we got a couple of people on the chat here that are asking a couple of questions about you. Paul, help me here. Casey, help me here with something called OnlyFans. They want to know if Marty can have an OnlyFans page.
A what?
That's what I'm asking.
The hell is that, Casey?
An OnlyFans page?
It's just a question in the chat.
I think it's a legitimate question. Casey, care to explain?
It's a platform for content creators to use a paywall. So you pay like a $1 to get into their content.
Okay, but I mean, I'm guessing now, hearing you say this, a lot of this is sexual stuff. Is that right?
I would say that this kind of content is not exactly suited for Mr. Marty.
Okay, but I'm saying you could make the argument that an OnlyFans content page could be Marty Brennaman giving daily thoughts every single day about baseball, right?
And that's what its initial intent was for.
Okay, I see. Okay, for content.
It was for content.
Okay, well, maybe forget that part of it then, that name. But let's just say, like having a content kind of thing. Can you imagine the money you'd be raking in if all of a sudden you had some paywall up and you could give your thoughts of the day on anything and everything. Have you thought about that?
That's never crossed my mind not one time. See, I don't want to be tied down to do something every day. I mean, the idea of retirement is to be retired. And if I thought I had to get up every morning and stand in front of a telephone like we're doing right now and talking to people and expressing opinions about everything on earth, I'm not interested in that. I truly am not.
Okay.
I appreciate the thought.
All right. Well, the other thing that there's some OCD folks out there, and I'm well aware of OCD, but they're sitting here watching you today, and they're noting that the picture directly behind you that says Reds Radio on it is really off center here, and it's bothering a lot of people. Have you noticed that? Do you walk around the room at all and straighten them up?
Look at that.
I don't know. That doesn't look good. It might be the top one that's actually a little bit off.
How's that look?
That's better.
Is that any better? Some of you is
that better?
Much better. Said everybody who was really uptight about that, they're all good now. They're all good now.
They need to get a life if all they're worried about is a damn picture behind me.
Well, I mean, that's a big league office you got down there and a big league room and a basement.
I got a lot of pictures here. There's a lot of stuff in this room where the people come in to straighten it up and clean it up, and inevitably frames get turned, and it bothers me too. And I want to take back what I just said. I apologize to that person, and I hope it looks better now, and they will have a better day because I straightened the frame out.
Amen. Hey, we're all about having a better day.
Let me make one point before we close.
Yes.
God bless the memory of Mike Leach.
Yep.
I was a big fan. I've done a lot of reading about Mike Leach, things I did not know in light of the tragic passing of the Mississippi State coach. The guy was really something. And I know there's a cry going out now that he gets in the College Football Hall of Fame, and they have a stupid rule that they don't consider any coach if he has less than a 600 winning percentage. And he is at 596. Had he won one more game, he would have been at 600 winning percentage.
Yep.
And if that's the only thing that keeps Mike Leach out of the Football Hall of Fame, then those people ought to be condemned for a stupid, stupid rule. I think you have to take a guy's body of work. I mean, he was the author of the air raid offense. Interestingly enough, he was an assistant coach, offensive coordinator in the late 90s at the University of Kentucky under Hal Mumme. And Hal Mumme had a lot to do with the air raid offense too, but Leach was the guy looked upon as being the guy that had the most to do with it. I think it's a sad thing. He had a great family. He'd been married forever, and I just hope that he gets his just due, even though now he will not be around to enjoy it.
I read that same thing you did about the stipulation in there about winning percentage. And, the first thing I thought of, and this wasn't the case with Paul Brown. He was only at Ohio State for a short period of time, won a national championship, all that kind of thing. But you look at the programs that Leach took over. They were all a disaster, right? I mean, he starts at Texas Tech, disaster. Gets them in the right direction. Washington State, I think I read yesterday, the year before he got there, had won 2 games each of the 3 prior years per season. And then he comes to Mississippi State, which you and I both know. I mean, in that Southeastern Conference, in that Western half, you've got Alabama, LSU, and then pretty much everybody else forever and a day. And all of a sudden, he's built that thing up. And I got to thinking about, how innovative he was. He learned under Mumme when he was at Kentucky and the offense and all that kind of thing. But I got to thinking, say Paul Brown had stayed in college, right? But he was a guy that came up with the idea about using the tight end as a receiver. He was a guy that came up with the idea, although it was never implemented when he was there or when he was in the pros, about having a headset or a microphone or an earpiece inside the quarterback's helmet to relay and call all the plays. I mean, innovative. It never ended, right? And to think that you got to win 60% to get in the Hall of Fame is just, you'd like to think they're going to change that.
I hope it's a stupid rule. A real stupid rule.
All right. Well, Dad, we
I
thank
got.
you very much. I'm getting lit up on the chat because I didn't know what this thing was, so forgive me. I wasn't trying to embarrass anybody.
I gotta be honest, Tom. I thought you were doing a bit. This is even better.
A bit?
Yeah, we thought you were joking.
We
at
thought you
first.
were joking around.
Somebody asked Sharon, who loves Tracy Jones, was the one who brought it up in the chat.
Oh, of course.
Yeah.
Now, Sharon strikes me as somebody that would be into OnlyFans.
She probably is on OnlyFans.
Sharon probably is on OnlyFans.
I'm not going to say that about Sharon. She's a loyal follower of the program, and we're grateful she's here, and she's got something for Tracy Jones and obviously has something for Marty Brennaman. So, Dad, have a great day.
All right, bud.
I think
All
it's
right.
Y'all
obvious.
take care.
All right, be well.